Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is July 8th, year 2021. Welcome to the channel here. Now, a couple of you more perceptive individuals noted the change in title, and up to the very last minute of showtime, I was trying to decide what would be a proper reflection of the content of this talk today. And well, I'll tell you, I was inspired by this particular biography. As you know, I've put a challenge to myself reading primarily biographies and fiction by women, inspired by V.C. Andrews and other people. They're the masters of Gothic fiction, for one thing, but that's another topic that we can treat here. But this book here is I think it's the first full-length biography of the writer Nora Ephron, and it's titled "I'll Have What She's Having." And of course, we'll talk about what that phrase, that title, what it alludes to. Many of you know this because this was drawn from one of the more popular films, especially in the romantic comedy genre. One of the most popular American films in recent time, maybe of all times. I don't know what the exact box office might have been, but it was an international hit as well. But certainly it captured the hearts and minds and the imaginations of many Americans of different backgrounds, different age groups, because no matter who we are, at some level, we're interested, intrigued, or maybe even fortunate enough to be involved in romance. And that brings me to the second part of today's talk, and that's where Professor Hamamoto will weigh in about his own list. And I came up with 14 or 15 points. I don't know if I'll be able to get to all of them. And this is where the original title comes in. The pointers that I'm providing here by the end of this talk, the title of that section is How to Star in a Romantic Comedy of Your Own Scripting. That is, you are the author of your own situations. I won't say of your own life, right? That comes from a divine source. But beyond that, most of it is up to you. Regardless of what the therapists say or the so-called experts who represent corporations largely or NATO, we're the ones who are in charge here. And that's an ethos that I think is very much integral to the romantic comedy. These characters make their own future together, but not without a little bit of serendipity and a little bit of luck and perhaps even misfortune. And that's what's so interesting about well, there are many things that are interesting about the romantic comedy. But it's the fates, right, with a capital F, right? We're familiar with that idea. And accident, gosh, good people are always having accidents visited upon them, you and me included. And it's so nice and so refreshing when it goes in the other direction to favor us. And I think that is the eternal appeal of the romantic comedy. However, there was when you think about it, there was a long lull between the classic romantic comedies of the 30s and 40s. Of course, World War II is not really, it's not really the right circumstance for a lot of lighthearted humor. It started to pick up again in the 1950s. You have Doris Day and Rock Hudson, but through the 60s in particular, 60s, 70s, American society in general, American culture, and the movies, it all kind of went dark. I'm not dark and literally, but I mean in terms of sentiment and feel and values. And it was like that for, I can't put a timeline on it, but I think at least 20 years, an entire generation, right? And Nora Ephron, as a writer, had grown up with that whole ethos of the romantic comedy and the glamour of the latter phase, maybe the terminal phase of classic Hollywood. through her parents, who I'll speak to in a moment. They're a very important influence on her as a professional, as a human being. But there was a lull. There was a lull, let's say, through the 60s and 70s and 80s, maybe even going into 30 years, so far as these bedrock values and interests that most human beings have. I'm sure there are people like your Charles Bukowski, who wrote Anti-Romance, because I've been revisiting his fiction lately. An excellent writer, by the way. I'm not putting him down, but he's at the polar opposite of a Nora Ephron. And so this is the argument of the book, too, and I happen to agree with it. The subtitle of the book is How Nora Ephron's 3 Iconic Films Saved the Romantic Comedy, because it looked like it was never going to come back. And that is not so unusual in film history or literary history, of any type of history. Just the example of the Western. Westerns were hugely popular, not just in the movies, in the film, in cinema, but also on television. Prime time television was dominated by Westerns for the longest time through the 50s and 1960s. In fact, one of my mentors, Professor Fred McDonald, wrote an entire monograph on that. It was cleverly titled, Who Shot the Sheriff? Subtitled The Death of the Television Western. So we've seen genres disappear, and the Western kind of, by the way, that might be a genre that's due for a comeback, sort of a high noon type of motif, sort of a transcoded story about the bad actors, right? They wearing medical smocks, perhaps, or these experts and all the cowards of the town who refuse to stand up to the bad guys, right? It's a classic dilemma that all human civilizations the world over face, and American films are very good for a moment in time in capturing those tensions. And it's no surprise that these films are admired not just in the U.S. but throughout the world. And I encourage you to do your own independent film study. You don't need to go to university anymore or college. You can, thanks to the DVD revolution, you can get all kinds of extras on these movies that'll tell you anything that you'd learn in college. And I, in particular, have been looking at the musicals. The musical extravaganzas of the classic, the golden age of the musical, going from the 30s to the 40s. And again, it was World War II that kind of brought it down to really sort of serious and very highly propagandistic films. But here's a good one. It's Fred Astaire. Everybody knows who that is. Not everybody really recognizes Eleanor Powell for her genius. And I myself had not fully recognized what a great performer, and that includes dancing and singing and acting, of course, that Eleanor Powell was. And I haven't found a full-length biography. There's tons of them on Fred Astaire, but I haven't found a full-length biography on Eleanor Powell. And a film scholar needs to jump on that one. Perhaps the values are passé. Maybe it's, she's just kind of went under the radar so far as, everybody likes Fred Astaire. Ginger Rogers is another popular one, and both of them have been written about extensively. One of the secondary characters is George Murphy, and it wasn't Ronald Reagan who was the first politician that came out of Hollywood. He became governor of California, and then he became, as you know, president of the United States. George Murphy preceded Ronnie Reagan into the arena of politics. He started out as a song and dance man, a hoofer, a dancer, a good one, an entertainer. Not as good as Fred Astaire, truthfully, but he was up there. He was well accomplished. Not maybe as good as Gene Kelly, but he's certainly respectable. And then he went into California politics. So, and then there was a series of these. I think there were 3 or 4 of them. Broadway Melody of 1938 is, I think, the first of the series. And they have some incredible dance sequences here. And more than a couple of these were choreographed, if not directed, by the great Busby Berkeley, and that's another person who has not had a decent biography, full-length biography, devoted to his contribution to the art of not just film, but to dance and American arts and letters. So I've been doing my research here, and the musical is even extended to the world of ice. This film's called Iceland, right? Appropriately enough, and it featured Sonja Henie, and she was I forgot her nationality. I think she might have been Norwegian. I might have got it wrong. Forgive me for mistaking it. But she was, I think she was a naturalized American citizen, but her origins were in Scandinavia. And there was some controversy later on because she seemed to have some Third Reich sympathies, but she was very popular in her day and age. And there's sort of a pro-American which kind of undercuts the argument that she had Nazi sympathies, but it's a pro-American recruiting tool musical starring Henie and an actor by the name of John Payne back then. So watching that, because these are not available on Netflix. They're pushing them out. They're putting Dark Mirror and all the Netflix originals, and some of them are good, admittedly. But some of the classic films, I think, are going by the wayside. So I'm getting them while I can. And like The American Dollar, I think they're going to be pulled and substituted with something else. And then State Fair, Dana Andrews, right? Wholesome Americana, Jean Crane, great actress. And the county fair, the state fair, maybe we'll be able to indulge ourselves this summer. We missed it last summer because of the pandemic. But I think I'm going to go to the California State Fair. I'm not far by. There's a whole fairgrounds not far from where I am. But there are also local county fairs that are really important to support now, because the agricultural community is going to come under a concerted attack by the same forces that attacked the people who live in the city areas. So we need to support them and exchange information between the country and the city. We'll have to work together to pull through this manufactured globalist NATO/Pentagon crisis. And that's where the politics hits the fun, ladies and gentlemen. You notice I like to kind of intermingle the two because I think they're inseparable. So I'm gonna give you and it's a tongue-in-cheek. I'll warn you, point-by-point tutorial how you also can find your soulmate. Isn't that what they call them? When did that concept? That's like a 80s, maybe earlier. The idea of having a soulmate, but you two will be forever linked up with a brave, a courageous, a beautiful, and of course they have to be exceptionally witty, funny, and they have to be uncommonly smart, right? And of course they always have to have lived in your neighborhood. You never met them in all the years. You might have passed them in the street or at the supermarket, but you meet them in some random place. It could be the Goodwill donation center, at church, at temple, or maybe you're in a minor fender bender, and there you go. That's called a cute meet in romantic comedy language. There's a formula to it. Formula doesn't mean bad, right? There's a formula to the best drama and literature. Don't kid yourselves. It's pretty rare to find something that is not based on a precedent, literary, musical, whatever it is. So formula, I'm not using it in a disparaging sense. In fact, it's kind of fun to work against the formula, the cliche, see how you can play with them and twist them and adapt them to new realities. And that was, I think, one of the genius qualities of Nora Ephron, who started as a writer and then later became a director by her own admission, because the money was better, and secondly, she got to protect her material and really go through the whole, from top to bottom, the whole process of movie making, like the old time directors did, from casting to the selection process of scenes, right? Like, how are we going to do the concluding scene in Sleepless in Seattle. And that was part of her romantic trilogy, by the way, Sleepless in Seattle. Most of you are familiar with that film. If not, check it out, rent it. How do you do this? They couldn't get the observation deck at the Empire State Building. I hate to tell you this, but it was done at a warehouse in Seattle where they were filming the principal scenes in the film Sleepless in Seattle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I was inspired to do this live stream by this person here who will go down not just in Hollywood history, but in American arts and letters as being one of the really great American writers around. Because like I said, she started out as a quote unquote serious writer. She was a humorist, right? But she was a serious, dedicated, devoted student of literature, of arts and letters. And it reflected in her work. And I first, I knew of Nora Ephron long before she started writing for the movies and long before she got into directing. My first, because I was an aspiring writer too. I still am an aspiring writer, even though I've published a few books by now. But I still consider myself a hustler who's trying to write that book, that one book that's going to really satisfy me. And I'm working on it right now. And I don't like to talk about it for superstitious purposes or reasons. But anyway, she was a student of writing, and me as an aspiring writer used to see her byline in Esquire magazine. In fact, I think in high school, certainly by college, I had my own subscription. They deliver Esquire magazine every month to me, and I'd look through it. Nora Ephron's articles were all there. I remember one special, it was thick. It had a whole fold out of all the great writers who had at one point in their careers contributed to Esquire magazine. And it was all there, and I'd have the fantasies of one day contributing to Esquire. And of course, if it's even around it, I don't know, but yeah, I think it's gone. It certainly bears no similarity to the fact when Nora Ephron was writing, I think it was already starting to tank. And who was it? Graydon Carter was the editor for a long time. I think he retired a few years ago. So American publishing and magazine, as well as books, and now we're seeing movies that are being perverted by Netflix, are taking a big hit right now. And that's why another one of the reasons why I want to revisit Nora Ephron and her work, because I don't think these values can be allowed to lapse, right? Because if we're not watering them, tending to the garden, the weeds will start coming in. Netflix, and by the way, Michelle and Barry Obama have a huge multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract with Netflix. If we don't weed the garden, then people like that are going to provide the entertainment, quote unquote, in the documentaries for the American people. Not only that, but the technology, the access, and the information and the hookups are available now for us to do our own work. We don't have to have a heavily budgeted movie to get a point across. We don't need to have a high budget to field sports teams, right? We don't have to indulge in the NFL. Well, we can just did it when we were kids, sandlot baseball, football, whatever it might be, just basketball in the gym, out in the street, out on the playgrounds, right? We don't need professional athletics or professional entertainment when you comes down to it. That they were built up into industries that recruited the top level talent, but now that talent has been perverted, and the ones that we admired and could really learn from have long ago been swapped out. And that's why a lot of people are frustrated and have even turned their back on Hollywood, so-called. So Hollywood people and all you professionals who think you're, on top of the political agenda, I think you need to follow the lead of people like David Mamet, who was once upon a time a liberal, a Hollywood liberal or a New York liberal, and started reassessing his own politics and said he's Americana, right? Wouldn't call him a conservative, but he is definitely Americana, because that's the direction of the rest of the country is heading. And if you don't know that, you're not paying attention, or you're locked in some sort of bubble there that Netflix has created for you. It's not a bubble, really. It's more like a tiger trap. So I should remind you, because some people have been asking me. I'm glad to report that the Thursday trio, will have all three of us. We were down to a duo for the last couple of weeks, and most of you who watch these programs, the related network of shows, know that George was. I'm not laughing at him. I'm just, it's just so ludicrous. He got hit again. He got attacked by Bezos.com, otherwise known as Amazon. And I don't have to tell you what he and the Neighborhood News Group and others have done to go around that. They're doing their own publishing. How's that, right? That's what I'm telling you. We don't need the big boys, the big girls, to make our movies, our books, our sports, or anything. We can do it ourselves, and that's true for our politics too. We don't have to have somebody represent our interests. We will do that for ourselves. We'll elect someone who shares our same values and our same political agenda as a convenience, but we're not any longer going to be supporting these oppressive dynasties, such as the Getty, Getti, Familia Getty, right? They'll probably go back to the Farnese family, right? So far as we know, I think we got to look at their bloodlines, the Getty bloodlines, way before they came to America. And part of that La Familia Getty is the La Familia Pelosi or D'Alessandro. So we're going to check out the bloodlines here, because I think to me that's equally as important as the tools and the various devices that they deploy against us in the area of technology. So let me give you a brief background, because I want you to read her biography and just read articles about very, very smart articles about Nora Ephron. She was admired by writers in particular. She has that do or die writer ethic that most writers have, because you need that if you even hope to have any sort of chance of being heard or read in a very competitive and crowded field. So I mentioned earlier their parents were writers as well. Her mother, her name is Phoebe, and her father, Henry, were a writing team. They were a husband and wife writing team. I think they started on Broadway. And this is they came up when there was a lot of live theater. And this is New York City, of course, Manhattan, but it's true in other parts of the country. Any major city had a theatrical live theatrical entertainment. So that's how they got their experience, and that's how they gained a following and recognition for doing good, solid work for the stage. And back then, when you did that, you oftentimes were recruited to go to work for Hollywood, because they know you can deliver the goods. Characterization, plot, formula. And, we've all heard the stories on all the frustrated, great, ruined careers of the writers who went to Hollywood and went down. And Nora Ephron doesn't play that card. She does admit that her mother and father fought often. They were just at each other's throats, so to speak, relentlessly. And it wasn't helped by the fact that both of them were raging alcoholics. And Nora Ephron and her sister, Delia, who's also a writer, and I think she had a brother as well. I don't think he went into the arts. But, it's like a standard post-war family, 3 or 4 kids, and a husband and wife that, they were typically even back then, divorce was a social taboo all the way up and down, whether you're, well, maybe not the super elite. They got divorced, more often, but certainly middle class, upper middle class, working class people. Divorce was as unknown as cancer. They were both, whispered quietly in the household whenever a couple was splitting up, or whenever they had the big C, right? Cancer. So they, Phoebe Ephron, and it seems that she was really the more talented of the two, and the father, Henry, were responsible for, I'll just give you one example. They together wrote over a dozen big ones. I mean, box office, right? Box office draw, not B movie. Not that I'm downgrading B movies, but the big ones. And this was a Technicolor film. It's called Carousel. Again, it's a musical, 1956. But as some of you might know, and I alluded to it earlier, the values and the culture changed in America. And if not America, but Britain and most of the world, right? Counterculture. And many people are still pissed off at the counterculture for ruining the world. Because I did a talk previously on the anti-Beatles psyops, the creatures of Tavistock and EMI, and they pervert, all that stuff. And there's still these trolls out there that automatically have a knee-jerk reaction to that. And I was partly trying to test that and see if it's very strong. But indeed, the culture did change. So they went out of fashion. I think by the mid to late 60s, Phoebe Ephron and Henry Ephron were not getting the contracts. And you could live very well as a Hollywood writer back then and now. Nora Ephron lived a relatively privileged, I have to say, upper middle class background in Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills, even back then was a high rent district. And I used to go there with my dad because he was a landscape contractor. Maybe he even landscaped the Ephron household, but he did a lot of movie people, actresses, producers, attorneys, and agents. That was my father. And that's one of the reasons why I've maintained a lifelong interest with film, because I kind of got a behind the scenes look at it. From having grown up in Los Angeles and visited the studios, and having, later on having friends who were involved in the movie making or music business, which is very much related. So she comes from that entertainment, that writing royalty, right? And she got her initial training from her mother and father. Whenever she, I'm talking about Nora Ephron, said something clever at the dinner table. This is in the days when most families had dinner together. There was a dinner table and there was mother, dad, and the kids there, and they would sit down at 6 o'clock in the, whatever your dinner time was, and have a home cooked meal, right? This is before the TV dinner. This is before McDonald's. This is before this is before Happy Meals, right? We're going way back here. But around the dinner table, you can imagine you have two writers, a mother and a father, adults who are writing for Hollywood, and they've already conquered the New York stage, and they're probably contributing to some of the fashionable magazines. Magazines were big back then. And you can imagine the conversations around the dinner table, but her parents always said, when Nora said something witty or clever, said, "Yeah, you better write that down. That's all copy. COP. That's journalism talk that's material. We call it. That's content. Everything's content today, right?" And that's not news to me. I developed these techniques. I was known in junior high school for always having a little notepad with the spirals on top, so that you fits right in there, not on the side because it's harder to put in your pocket. Spirals on top. I have tons of that, and I still use this technique. I have these notebooks all over the place. I have the larger format, and it's a ton of notes. It's full ton of song premises, song lyrics, words, and and anything else that comes to mind that needs to be recorded. And this might be a habit that you yourself who are watching maintain, which is good. So I had that sort of quirk even as a teenager, because, like I said, I wanted to be a writer when I grew up, and perhaps one day I'll make it. I have to grow up first, though. So the three big films that the author's name, by the way, is Erin Carlson. Really, she's a good writer herself. She's funny. She doesn't try to take the spotlight off of Nora Ephron, but in her own right, Carlson is very witty and clever herself. But anyway, the big three movies are When Harry Met Sally, This is way back in 1986. Oh my gosh, how time flies. When Harry Met Sally. And do I have to tell you who the lead actors were? Okay. No, I don't. Billy Crystal, Mr. Saturday Night. Meg Ryan. Okay. Now you remember. And if you recall back then, that's when everybody was in love with Meg Ryan. She was America's sweetheart. And Billy Crystal, man, his career just skyrocketed. He did a series of hosting, I guess it was the Academy Awards, and he had a gosh, I miss him. Where is he? He needs to be in another film. So does Meg Ryan. You know, someone should write a sequel to When Harry Met Sally at the retirement home, and pair them up together and write all kinds of clever repartee between each other. But you know what? People don't want to see that. I don't think they do. So never mind, because we have to go with what is saleable in the market. I personally would not want to see them. I mean, it was very depressing to see that Martin Scorsese movie of a year or two ago of all these old gangsters that we, including Robert De Niro, that we all loved from Goodfellas and those earlier gangster movies. They're they're in retirement. They have one foot in the grave, if I can put it so crassly. So When Harry Met Sally, the second of the trilogy, the great romantic comedy revival trilogy, was Sleepless in Seattle. This is 1993. And before that, no one really paid much attention to Seattle unless you lived up there or, did a lot of travel between, an I-5 going from Southern California or Mexico up to Canada. And later on, the grunge scene was kind of happening around the same time. And now it's a tourist destination, including the fish market there, right? So they help do that, and maybe they got some development money in doing so, because these romances can happen everywhere. They don't all have to happen in New York City. They don't all have to happen in Los Angeles or in San Francisco. I want to see them happen in Fargo, North Dakota. Right? Oh, I'm sorry, that's been done already, Fargo. Except they have Steve Park as kind of a pathetic guy who will never get a date, right? But anywhere there are people, there will be romance and romantic comedies as a result. But for some reason, New York is the stage set for most of these, and maybe that's going to be over thanks to the pandemic. That New York is going to be nothing but a giant globalist hub where very few people will want to even visit, let alone live. And that's your decision, Mr. and Mrs. Globalist, if you want to see that. And you'll just be living in a sterile environment yourself. It'll be your own little hygienic utopia that you've always dreamed of. And at the first sign of infection, you're going to go down really quick. And then the third of the trilogy is You've Got Mail, 1998. And I think that's the weakest one. At this point, Nora Ephron was kind of she had gone to the well one time too many. And what I find most odious about it is that the film tried to bring in this whole idea of cyber relationships, right? This is the beginning of it came a little bit later, but the internet was still relatively new. And those of you who were around back then remember that phrase from, was it what? America Online, AOL, didn't it? It said, you've got mail, right? And email was a big deal. Now, a lot of these relationships have moved online. I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I don't know. You decide. And in reading this, I realized I missed an important, I was aware of the movie, but I haven't seen it. I'm going to go back and watch it. It was the film version of Bewitched. This came out in 2005. And it starred, this must have been typecasting, but it starred Nicole Kidman. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I stayed away from it. Nicole Kidman was there. And for those of you who were around earlier, Bewitched was a TV situation comedy. I wrote a book on situation comedies. I know the program. Well, I grew up with it. I watched it every week along with all the other baby boomers. And it starred Elizabeth Montgomery, who, by the way, her father was a very good actor, actually, George Montgomery, as well. So she grew up in this Hollywood entertainment milieu herself. But that was Elizabeth Montgomery, and now made into a film. And typically, at least so far as I'm concerned, these movie adaptations of television shows don't necessarily work out that well. But I'll suspend judgment until I watch the movie. It's got to have some interesting elements to it if Nora Ephron was involved with the film as she was. Now, this is what really caught my attention, because I didn't even know. I mean, I read her humorous writing, and it wasn't ha-ha type writing for Esquire, but it had an undertone of mockery and self-mockery as well. And she didn't spare anybody, by the way, with her acerbic wit in these Esquire articles, and she lost, friends and won some in the process, I'm sure, of some very, powerful people in society that they could have helped her career along. But I knew her before she became the queen of the romantic comedy revival. I knew her from being the co-writer, the co-screenwriter, along with Alice Arlen. I think Alice Arlen is also related to, married to, or is the daughter of, or sibling of another Arlen, not Harold Arlen, the songwriter, but he was a television critic. I forgot his name. He was a really, I think he wrote for the New York Times or something. But anyway, Alice Arlen and Nora Ephron co-wrote this screenplay. And this film, you got to see this, especially what's going on today in 2021. The film is called Silkwood, 1983. And it's a film version of an article that originally, if memory serves, appeared in Rolling Stone magazine before Rolling Stone became a globalist mouthpiece that it is today. This is when Jan Wenner was still actively editing the publication, which started out as a tabloid here in counterculture San Francisco. So the counterculture wasn't all bad, was it? And then they got hijacked and they got co-opted, and now it's a globalist rag, right? But there was an article, and I remember reading it, because remember, I wanted to be a writer when I grew up. So I read everything. And I read that feature article, Silkwood. It's about Karen Silkwood, who was a worker at the Kerr-McGee Atomic Power nuclear energy plant. And she was noting, this was like one of the early quote unquote whistleblower movies. It was a really compelling, that article from Rolling Stones needs to be dredged up and republished. We need it here in 2021, because there's so many similarities between Kerr-McGee and the NIH and the University of North Carolina, University of Wisconsin, Yale, Harvard, University of California, and all these institutions that are involved in the military industrial power, genetic, nuclear, kinetic warfare industry. And throw in there human trafficking, sex slavery, and pedophilia, and you pretty much understand the globalist business model of the 21st century. So this movie came out in 1983. This is Silkwood. I said, wow, Nora Ephron, wow, she's come a long way from those Esquire magazines, which bordered on cutesy, right? They were still sharp, but they were kind of cutesy. This is a heavy, heavy movie. It's not a documentary. It's a narrative film. And guess who? Well, it's not too much of a stretch. She was already big time by this point. Meryl Streep. She was in there, and she had a succession of incredible, heavy social issue, political issue, real ones, not bogus type issues that you see today, 2020, 2021, but real political movies, right? Coming from the headlines, so to speak, as in the case of the Rolling Stone article, Silkwood. I can't remember who the author of it was. I'll have to check that out again. And I'm going to read the article later on. So you had Meryl Streep, right? And about Schindler's List. That was a literary adaptation. I read it. I can't remember the author. I think he was South African, the fiction, because I'm a big reader of fiction as well as biography and films and anything that originates with the written word, right? Okay, so it was her, but guess who her co-star was? And this is when I first developed an appreciation for this person we know as Cher. That's right, Cher, Cher Sarkeesian, as in Sonny and Cher, because she'd already had that Sonny and Cher shtick done and buried, right? I think the show, the TV variety show, the Sonny and Cher comedy, I think that had run its course. So I pretty much, okay, that's Cher, and who else? Let's bring on someone new. And then she appears in this movie, Silkwood, and I go, man, Cher is great. And then after that, she's in Moonstruck with Nicolas Cage. I said, all right, I'm a Cher fan for life now. She refuses to go away. She's incredibly talented. She's a good actress. I like to see her in a new movie in 2021 or 22. And I'll overlook her politics. I really don't care. She's a good artist, right? And we don't need to be nitpicking everybody and saying, yeah, you got to be a Democrat. You have to be a supporter of Biden or Trump or whatever. We have deeper issues that we need to grapple with. So I'm asking everybody to come together on these issues. And I've alluded to them in coded form in this cast because I don't want to win the battle. I don't want to win the war, which we will, and be a victim of 100% casualty rate, right? So I want this channel to go on so I can keep casting like this. Ephron was a feminist, but not a strident academic type feminist. She was an organic feminist. She got it from her mother. She got it from the people that she worked with the publishing world. And her number one dictum was, I'm quoting here, Nora Ephron, above all, be the heroine of your life, not the victim. Be the heroine of your life, not the victim. Because we do have a victim psychology that comes from Dr. Sigmund Freud and all his disciples. We alluded to this in earlier talks. And the whole psychology therapeutic Dr. Eric Grande syndrome has crippled us so far as a people, right? When we didn't have all these professional paid therapists, we were a lot stronger. And so let's, find your therapist and become your own heroine, become the own author, become your own scriptwriter of your own romantic comedy or your own heroic tragedy if you want to. You pick the genre, right? All right. It says take notes. Everything is copy. I already said this. This is, and I happen to agree with this. Quoting again, Nora Ephron says, I try to write parts for women that are complicated, that are as complicated and interesting as women actually are. Very, very true. And I hope I'm not accused of sexist if I go so far as to state that women are far more interesting than men are. Maybe it's just the movies I watch, but I think even in the interaction, I like the emotional depth of women and the feeling, and they're always thinking about relation, not romantic, children, mother, father, grandparents, people in general. They're always thinking about humanity, human relationships, work, of course. They're always thinking about that. Whereas men are much more monomaniacal or sort of one-dimensional, perhaps two-dimensional. So I try to learn from women in that regard. And some of them, of course, are horrible. They're terrible. You can't get any worse, whatever gender it might be. You can't get much worse than a Hillary Clinton, right? So that's not really the issue here. And we're all over this. We're done with this notion. Oh, if only women had political power, then the whole world would be a much warmer and fuzzy place. Well, we're seeing that didn't. I mean, I never bought into that in the first place, right? And this number 5, this last point before I go into my own recommendations here, tongue in cheek. Whatever you choose, this is Nora Ephron, whatever you choose, however many roads you travel, I hope that you choose not to be a lady. I hope you will find some way to break the rules and make a little trouble out there. And I also hope that you will choose to make some of that trouble on behalf of women. That's her privileged Wellesley. She went to Wellesley College, just like Hillary Clinton, by the way. I don't know if they knew each other. I think Hillary's a little bit older. That's her academic feminist cant that I can overlook. I think you can remain in being a lady and conducting yourself as a lady, but also being someone who really messes with the system. That is my preference so far as a romantic comedy is concerned. So you don't have to go to a delicatessen like Meg Tilly and fake an orgasm in front of everybody in order to make some sort of statement, right? It was a funny scene. I'm not, saying otherwise. And by the way, I learned in this book that Princess Diana, yes, that Princess Diana went to a screening of When Harry Met Sally, and she was sitting in the VIP box with Billy Crystal, and Billy Crystal tells a story. He says she just laughed like a horse. He said her laugh was so uproarious and so vulgar. It's like if you had gone out on a date with Princess Di, that would be the last time you went out with her, because her laugh was so it was a guffaw, it's very unprincely or princessly, I guess. Anyway, she loved it. She turned to Billy Crystal and said, "Oh, you naughty boy." Right. So, but she loved it. And later on, she scheduled a private screening for all her favorite royals, right? So they had this film had that kind of impact. Very quickly before I move on to my own shtick here, I would recommend another memorialist or writer, comedic writer. She never directed. I don't think she wrote a film either, but she wrote some really good books. She's funny. In a way, she's even more funny than Nora Ephron, although it's not really proper to compare the two. They're two different talents. But Carrie Fisher, Postcards from the Edge. Check that out. Shankaholic. I read that not long ago. Wishful Thinking. I have to read her first novel. I've not read Surrender the Pink. I think that's when people first said, "Wow, Princess Leia, man, she's pretty talented here." And she comes from showbiz royalty itself. And I'm running out of time, so I won't go into that. I'll give you one not recommended humorist who tries her darnest to shock and to amuse and to entertain us, but she fails miserably. Her name is Chelsea Handler. And the book that I read and turned me off, I was going in with the greatest expectations, but the book I read is My Horizontal Life. That is flat on her back, right? She's the liberated women that all the academic feminists would only have dreamt about. Definitely not a lady. So maybe she's inspired by Nora Ephron, but who knows if they even knew each other. That's Chelsea Handler, and she's still kind of hanging on there, doing her nudist shtick right now. Maybe she'll wind up on the Home Shopping Network or something. We'll see. I have 10 minutes to go, so let me give you my take on how to star in your own romantic comedy of your own scripting. And I want to just give you some preliminaries here, just some cautions, all right? Number one, do not go near the topic of true crime on your first date. Leave crime and murder and mayhem alone. I made the mistake of, this is during the time when the OJ trial was going on. I made the mistake of start talking about the OJ trial, and I was out with a lady friend of mine. I said, "Hey, we're in the area here. You want to go see the condo where OJ, allegedly, OJ took the life of Ronald Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson?" So we went by there. I drove by, and then we went out to eat after that. In retrospect, that was probably not very savvy of me. I did have a brief romantic interlude there, but any relationship that starts, oops, there's an earthquake going on right now, ladies and gentlemen. It's 3:50 p.m. I'm here in Sacramento, California, and can you see it? Yeah. It's a tierra de temblor. It's a shaker there. We usually don't get them up here. It's seismically inert, as they say. I don't really believe that. By the way, there's also a big fire going on in the Reading area. It's fire season here. So, number two, ensure that all, see, you can tell I'm used to it. I live in California, so, and I've also lived in Japan. They also have a lot of, ensure that all clothes that hang in your closet are your own. And I checked out my closet and I found this. Geez, this has been hanging in there for years. And I found this old Letterman's sweater. It says Brown University. You know, I never went to Brown. I visited there. I didn't attend or graduate from Brown, but this is hanging in my closet. And so if I wore it around, and people say, you know, what's the story behind that? And you don't want to have to be put in the position of explaining it, right? And there's a corollary to this. Remove all underwear that is not your own from the dresser drawers. Get all the old panties out, throw them away, give them away. Or if you like, wear them. You know, some people are into that. Avoid the tendency to discuss long spans of involuntary celibacy, right? Or incel. Don't talk about it, right? Because that immediately brings up the smiling, well, not smiling. He's kind of morose and dead serious, if you can pardon the expression. It brings up the face of Elliot Rodger, you know, and you don't want to conjure up that kind of energy when you're trying to establish the greatest romance ever in your life. Make sure before you, because usually the guy is doing the driving even now, make sure that in your radio, your stereo system, your car, make sure that you go through your MP3 player and you take out all the songs that don't fit your image, right? Because you'll wind up, the person you're writing with will lose all respect for you. And that happened to me. All these are drawn from experience, okay? Sanitize the MP3 player. I was driving around and we were having a great time. And I think we were on the way to visit the condo where Nicole Brown Simpson was, this is on the west side of LA, you know, was murdered. And all of a sudden in the rotation, what comes on but the Backstreet Boys, the song, I Want It That Way, right? So I was very embarrassed because, you know, I was trying to present a more sophisticated persona, and here it's a boys band, you know, a boy band, you know, boys for men with hairy backs, if you know what I mean. So with that, and I'll come back. We'll just give you a little taste here of my favorite boys band of all time. They're called In Sync. So let's join them here in rehearsal.
When I say I want it that way, but we are two worlds apart. I can't reach to your heart when you say that I want it that way. Tell me why ain't nothing but a heartache. Tell me why ain't nothing but a mistake. Tell me why I never wanted you to say I want it that way. Am I your fire? One desire. Yes, I know that's too late, but I want it that way. Tell me why ain't nothing but a heart. Tell me why ain't nothing but tell why I never wanted you to say I want it.
This is the tough part. It modulates, it goes to different key. See, it's falling apart. This is not this is In Sync. It's not the Backstreet Boys.
I want you to know that deep down inside of me, you are my fire, one desire. You are, you are,
another key change. Yeah. Yeah, they're going up really high now. Okay. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. So yeah, that song came on. I was really embarrassed, and when it came on the radio, and the person I was writing like, what is this? And she just laughed, and it was a nice icebreaker anyway, because a corollary to that is to find the love of your life, memorize the lyrics from some of these pop tunes like this one here. Because after I was busted for having this on my playlist, I turned it off, but I was reciting the lyrics back to her. I want it that way. And I did it in earnest, in all seriousness. All right. Okay, moving on here. Always leave a pair of novelty boxer shorts in your dresser drawer. Okay, novelty boxer shorts, because it conveys a sense of whimsy to the person that you're going to have an incredible life with for forever, right? By the way, Nora Ephron was married three times. At one time, she was married to Carl Watergate Bernstein, right, along with Woodward and Bernstein. So here's a pair of novelty boxer shorts that I always keep in my drawer, and the back part says Springfield Rocks, right? That's Homer Simpson. I don't know if these are radioactive or not, and I think they're clean. I can't tell, but yeah, I always keep some novelty boxer shorts there. Number 9, never get caught with a streetwalker in West Hollywood, right? That's what happened to Hugh Grant on that fateful day of January 27, 1995. Hugh Grant, he was the ultimate in romantic comedy lead men. And after that, his career never really rose to the same level, so far as I can tell. I don't know what's happened to him now. I'd like to see him in another romantic comedy. Maybe he'll be paired with Liz Hurley. And yeah, he was with a streetwalker, and at the time he was with Liz. I think they were engaged to be married. Liz Hurley, right? He was busted. Let's see here. When you go out, to a restaurant, not shopping or anything, but you go, or even shopping, because ladies like men who wear good shoes with real leather soles. All right, real leather soles. When you go out, wear a nice pair of shoes for your woman. Okay, this does not. I mean, there's Sperry types topsiders, made in China probably, but these are not appropriate, because you look like Spicoli in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Remember, he had those checkerboard Vans shoes, skater shoes, right? So that's not going to cut it. So I suggest that you suggest to your lady friend that you go antiquing over the weekend. Oh my gosh, you'll have the greatest romantic comedy for the ages. Just say, let's go antiquing this Saturday. What do you think? I don't even need to explain that to you ladies, right? Guys, you're probably clueless. So you'll ask a lady friend, someone at work, maybe your girlfriend, ask, what is this thing about antiquing, right? And if I was going to write a romantic comedy, and that's been one of my great unfulfilled ambitions, I would put a scene in there, right, of an antique expedition. Maybe that would be the opportunity for the cute meet. And as we wrap up here, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to put your comments down here for different types of plot points or situations, scenarios. We'll come up with our own plot points and make our own romantic comedy for all the ages. I want you to add your advice right here on the comments below, and maybe we can have a roundtable discussion about doing a romantic comedy. All right, my time is, I'm feeling some aftershocks here. I think it's the earthquake. I don't think it's the underwear. I mean, maybe that was a jinx. Yeah, that was a jinx. Okay, I'll leave you on this upbeat note here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with me today, and join us for the Thursday trio, we're going to be at full capacity, full steam today. The great George Webb is going to be there. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And I'll leave you with Joey, as my girlfriend used to call him, Fat One, but it's actually Fatone.
Ain't nothing but a miss. Somebody hear you say, he said, oh yeah, I want it that way. Y'all sing. Tell me why. Ain't nothing but a heart. Oh, tell me why. Oh, tell me. I never want to hear you say, but I want it that way. One more time. Ain't nothing but a heartache. Ain't nothing but a mistake. I never want to hear you say, I want it that way. Ain't nothing but a heartache. Hang it tough. Ain't nothing but a mistake. Hang it tough. We spent I never want to hear you say, where we spent it? That way. 'Cause I want it. Whatever band we are. Kill the bird.